Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for being here with us today, celebrating continued celebration of the exhibition As We Are. I'm here with Brian Smith, Anna Valenti, and Jenny Ibsen, three incredible artists featured in the show upstairs, all of whom have three-dimensional sculptural practices, and we're here to talk a little bit about their work and their process, and hopefully learn from each other. We'll go for 30, 40 minutes, and then we're going to open up the floor to questions. So as things come up, please feel free to, don't interrupt as we go, but ask at the end. So hold on to those questions. So welcome all of you to the stage tonight. I wanted to start off by asking each of you, so as you know, As We Are features artists that have deep ties or roots in Maine. I just wanted to ask each of you when you first got to Maine, how you made the decision to come, and where your studio practice is based now. So in whatever order feels good to you guys. Brian.
Sure, yeah. Hi, everyone. So I grew up in Burlington, Vermont, spent some time in Boston for undergrad and a few years in New York. And when I was living in New York, I was, I had a bit after undergrad where I wasn't making work, and I felt like I needed to wait for that studio before I could start making work. And then I couldn't afford it because it's New York studio prices, of course. And so I started thinking about grad school. I felt like I was in a rut. I felt like I was ready. And somehow, I still don't really know, but I ended up landing in Maine. I grew up in Burlington, like I said, and so I think it was like a little bit of a return to form, like a quieter environment and closer to nature, and nature's very important in my work. And so I came here for grad school, and really with the intention to go to grad school and then go back to New York. That was the plan. But I just fell in love with it, and I felt like the community here is really supportive. I felt like the art here is really amazing, and so to me, it just felt like the perfect fit. And I'm really glad I didn't rush out of here, and now I don't want to. So it's been a good experience.
And your studio is right now in Westbrook, right?
In Westbrook, yeah.
Hi, everyone. So excited to be here. I grew up in upstate New York, and I was looking for a community that was rich in clay. And going into college, really excited about mosaics and vessel building, and found Maine College of Art with that connection to watershed. And as soon as I visited, I fell in love with the community. I fell in love with the rich arts culture, which I had no idea. I thought it was a cute portside city, and when I visited, I was like, the ground you walk upon is clay. So I fell in love right away. And my studio is now based in Colorado, in Lafayette, so I work in a construction warehouse that I have a little pocket that is a ceramics studio, so it's an equally dusty space.
It was so fun visiting Anna's studio. It's out in the mountains, surrounded on all sides, just, acreage to work on. So yeah, just gorgeous, yeah. Jenny?
I moved to Maine in 2014 for undergrad. I went to Bowdoin College in Brunswick, and I started doing printmaking there. I wasn't an art major, but I just ended up finishing my major kind of early and taking a lot of art classes, which is really lovely. And after graduating, I stayed here, moved to Portland. I had a studio space in Brunswick for a while. And I only really recently transitioned to clay. I started ceramics. I took my first ceramics class in 2021. And then I've just been taking clay classes and having a studio practice in ceramics pretty diligently since then. I now work out of two places. I work at Handful Studios in Portland on Forest Ave. It's a really great community, class-based studio. There I'm the resident artist, but I also help run the kilns and like unload and load and wash things. And do all the nitty-gritty stuff. And then I work out of a community artist studio in South Portland as well.
Awesome. I realize in my haste to introduce all of you, I didn't introduce myself. So very quickly, I will say I'm Sayantan Mukhopadhyay. I'm the Assistant Curator of Modern and Contemporary Art here at the Portland Museum of Art, and the curator of As We Are upstairs. And I came to Maine a year and a half ago from Los Angeles. And it has been such an honor and a privilege to learn about the state's rich heritage and culture through the eyes of the artists in the show, in their studios, and each person here on the stage has been so instrumental to my finding a place and belonging here, so thank you so much. I do tours of the exhibition quite frequently. I did one earlier today, and I get to learn about people's curiosities and interests and questions in that process. So I thought I'd bring some of those questions to you, because usually I say, I don't know, and so this will be a good learning moment for me. But it's always fascinating to hear a lot of questions from the public about process. So I talk a lot about the ideas that inspire you, some of the more theoretical valences of your work. I go on and on about some of that, but then people will want to know exactly how something was made. So kind of the granular start to finish. And I think, I think a lot of us have that experience, particularly with works in 3 dimensions that aren't as maybe as self-explanatory as painting can sometimes be, or as photography can sometimes be. So I was hoping that each of you could maybe pick a work upstairs and tell us a little bit about how they were made, like start to finish. So maybe Jenny, could I ask you about, for example, the cabbage trophy, which is very beloved by everyone who comes through.
Yeah.
Including myself.
Thank you. So upstairs I have head cabbage, which was the first trophy I made of 4 trophies of my series of trophies that bunnies would give each other if they could. And so there's head cabbage, number 1 bun, top carrot, and crown jewel, which are all kind of garden adjacent trophies for bunnies. Part of a larger theme of my works of rabbits, which I've kind of been sticking with for the past couple years. It started with Lunar New Year being like the year of the rabbit a couple years ago, and kind of just transitioned into bunny obsession, I guess. So all of it's kind of just a recurring motif. It's a little bit whimsical, silly, also just like very colorful and playful. For head cabbage, it is there was a lot of cabbage imagery in my works, and so then I was just transitioning into what if I built a cabbage itself, and if it were a prize, why would it be valued, even though it's probably, it's like the top thing for a rabbit. I
love this hierarchy of vegetables that exists. Cabbage comes out on top, yeah.
And so I coil built a sphere, basically, to build the base of the cabbage. And then I rolled out some really thin slabs to kind of stick along the sides of it to build up the flaking like leaves popping out of it. And then kind of like really meticulously let it dry. I paint everything with a white slip. So the clay I use is terracotta. It's an earthenware. It's red. And so in order to have like the pigments kind of shine through on things, I paint them with a white slip first, just as the base layer, as you can see in this one, which is the carrots. And then I paint over that with underglazes to kind of color. And then I sgraffito through it, which is a ceramics process where you're like removing clay to reveal shapes. And so I sgraffito through to make my different patterns. Then you biscuit, which is the first fire. Then you clear coat it, which is a glaze in this case. And then in these series, I also did a third firing, which is a Leicester firing. It goes to a much lower temperature, but that's how you apply the gold on top of it, which is what makes it a trophy. It's real gold.
Is it real gold on top, gold leaf?
Yeah, it's 24 karat gold suspended in liquid.
let's not tell too many people about that upstairs. People are already trying to touch it, so yeah.
And now it's discontinued, so there's a shortage. Yeah. Yeah.
And I think there's some similarities with your process, Anna, because you also work in ceramics, but very different kind of core materials, right? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I love your work so much.
Sorry, I'm going just all over the place, but I know that we have a very good slide of your base materials.
Yeah, I just love the malleability of clay and its softness and also its rigidity. Like it's kind of this live form that you get to push against and it kind of tells you what it wants to do. And so I really enjoy weaving clay and working with negative space. And with that negative space causes a lot of drama and it wants to break or crack. So I started wedging fibers into the clay. And so I found paper fibers would be kind of annoying because they would mold within 2 weeks and be stinky, which I don't mind, and then they break down and are useless. So I started researching different hemp fibers, and they have a longevity. They're very hair-like, quite literally, and depending on their processes. So the one that I use with my clay is at the top right, and then, but on the next slide, I started kind of evolving from ceramics into this desire for kind of a self-hardening clay and a material that you don't really need the kiln. And so my partner works with hemp lime construction, and so it's insulating homes with hemp hurd and limestone. And kind of being around this construction site constantly, I was like, why don't I kind of build with it like clay? And so I started mixing it with water and building up forms with it. And so for the piece, Garden Wall, the large blue screen, I took hemp lime blocks that were tamped into a block form, let them cure, and then cut a template of the negative space out. And I was really curious about how with breeze blocks, which are kind of this mass-produced block used for courtyards and garden spaces, are so perfect and the same. And so I wanted to play with the humanity of that space and kind of highlighting the imperfections. And so this pattern, the edges don't fit, they kind of waver, and they just are a little bit off. And so after you cut the negative spaces out, they're able to stack with dowels, and then I finished each block with a lime plaster. So it's natural paint essentially, so it's limestone mixed with natural pigment and water. And so you can, the plaster is the final coat to a hemp lime home, and it seals the surface. I mixed in copper oxide, which is traditionally used for like pit firing and glazes and ceramics, which then had this crazy chemical reaction that with the lime, I don't know how to explain it, but it started like getting kind of patchy brown and having this reaction that was a little organic. And I enjoy that idea of it's alive still, and that it kind of, you think it's ending there and it's not. Yeah.
I like what you said about drama, because your studio is set in a very dramatic landscape, and there's just, I think about how wide and open it is, and I can just kind of picture you like playing with all these blocks and modular formations, and I saw some of that happen, and it's so exciting. And there's a continuity in kind of texture in all of your works, such a attention to the kind of tactile or haptic element, which I see you were mentioning the kind of rough-hewn quality that results after your firing process. So, Brian, do you want to pick? I was going to say the Homo aquaticus that sits so kind of resplendently as we exit the exhibition. I saw that very beginning stages when you were making that up in Waterville. So I was wondering if you could walk us through the process of making that sculpture.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, like, as you're saying, texture is something that really does link us all together, as well as sculpture and play. So when Sayantan came to my studio, I was like, okay, so here's the form, here's a patch of beads on it, and here are pool noodles that are taped to the bottom of it. Like, it's gonna have texture on the bottom, and it's gonna kind of look like that. And you were like, okay. But so this piece, I started working with highly textured surfaces. I can't quantify, I guess, when that was, but like really identifying that that's something that I like to focus with within my work when I was thinking about my work as being inspired from nature. And you know, like we look at this beautiful table up here, and it's perfectly smooth. The stage is smooth. The walls are as smooth as can be. And so in my eyes, I view a lot of texture as being equatable to a natural object. And so so I wanted to work with beads for a while, and I had the opportunity a few years ago and found out that it's not as cost prohibitive as I thought. I go to this big warehouse in Providence, and it's called Wolfie Myro. I'm no gatekeeper, check it out. But it's floor-to-ceiling boxes of antique vintage closeout beads that, like, many of them are from the 60s and 70s, and so it's, you know, you might want to wear a mask when you go there. But so I collect all these beads. I've worked with chains before, whatever. But for this piece, I knew I wanted to work with beads, and I knew I wanted to think about pattern in a more purposeful way. So I created the sculpture. It's welded steel, and then I created an encasement around it and cast foam to create the sweeping form. And then the kind of spiky bits on it are additive. And the end is plexiglass that's been embedded in there. And so let's see, so from there, I was working with a projector and wanted to kind of capture the dappled light effect that happens when something is underwater. And so I was projecting that image onto it, and in some places I think it comes through better than others, but I'm very happy with the texture and pattern that came from it. But ultimately it's just hours and hours and hours of putting on glue and beads and pins and going. And this piece, I felt confident about what I wanted it to look like at the beginning, and then halfway through I was like excited by it, but also pushing back on this idea that everything has to be surfaced in beads entirely. And like, it didn't end up being a shortcut, if you're wondering. It still took the same amount of time.
I got all the play-by-play text, so I
Yeah.
know it was not a shortcut.
I was like,
yeah.
Don't worry, it's gonna be done. But so I'm interested in mixing materials together, and that's actually a challenge in my studio. So I really tried to push back on that with this and have a lot of fun. When you go to the gallery and see, there are like even toy orcas and dolphins that are adhered to the plexiglass fin up at the top. So play has just been so important.
And I wanted to share with folks, because I saw this sculpture, this one in particular, travel in process while it was being made to different parts of Maine. So this sculpture has seen all corners of the state as Brian has moved from place to place. And I just think the dedication that it takes to kind of create a large-scale sculpture and then be committed to transporting it wherever you go to continue working with it. You know, I saw it up at Lunder, then I saw it at Hunoaks, and then it came here finally. Absolutely crazy that it's that it's just incredible that you are so committed to your craft that you're willing to schlep that around. I wanted to ask, I was hoping that maybe you had questions for each other, but one of the things that I really did want to touch on, because we have a beautiful image of it, Jenny, one of the things that in your work, this kind of garden element, which I think extends into your work and life beyond kind of the ceramic studio. And I was hoping you could talk a little bit about your social practice and the Fish Picnic series and how it relates to your kind of practice writ large, more broadly. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I like to say that my studio practice is really a community-based art practice. I feel very external in how I live my life, but also how I create my art. These photos specifically are part of Fish Picnic, which is a food series and public art performance that I started a couple years ago and have temporarily paused, but who knows what the future holds. It began with some COVID relief funding and then transformed into kindling funding from Space Gallery in Portland. But basically, the essence of Fish Picnic is that I prepare food and plate it right on directly onto a table. I set up the tables outdoors in Maine, gather friends and strangers, and it's a free meal where everyone gets to eat side by side and share food with each other. It was really exciting to have that kind of as an opportunity after COVID, since we'd all been so cooped up, and also just finding a way to have outdoor meals still and cherish the access to land and food that we have in Maine, and kind of bring all those things together with a little community. And the original idea was that the food would be plated on the tablecloths, and the tablecloths would be a print to kind of remember the meal of, and then I'd have a series of tablecloths. Great in concept, very stinky, like so oily, because it's just like a salad with a lot of like balsamic dressing on a tablecloth. So that was a little more like idealistic, but in concept, I think it worked. I think by the last meal that I held, the first 30 minutes of the dinner were kind of like held out as like a plating moment together. So I ended up bringing boxes of food and spoons, and people would walk around the tables and we'd all kind of plate the tables together, which felt like a really lovely way to kind of like dovetail what I was trying to accomplish through the dinners and make it a little more interactive than just me coming and preparing everything, which is also lovely too. I think in the future it could make a lot of sense as a community potluck or something where it's a little more give and take and people can contribute things in different levels, but
This is so idealistic, but I've mentioned this to you. I thought it would be so nice to have your like vessels be what we eat out of, not to desecrate them like that. But I don't think you would see it as a desecration probably, but just it may be kind of logistically impossible, but it is a dream that I have to really eat out of that cabbage. It can be fun. But community, I love what you said about kind of the relational aspect of your practice more broadly, and I think it's embedded in all of your works. Anna, you speak really beautifully about kind of your interest in garden architecture and how something like a garden wall punctuates an outdoor space to give people an opportunity to gather around it that they otherwise might not have. So it's a moment of communal rest or relaxation in a place where there's no kind of interior architecture to guide that. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the place of community or kind of relationship making in your ceramics practice.
Yeah, absolutely. I adore your fish picnic, by the way. I'm like, I want to do a collaboration, and I see the same as like your vessels as these offerings and your spoons too. So hopefully
Let's get
more
that
to
on the
come.
calendar.
Let's make it happen.
Yes.
But yeah, so I'm really interested in the garden space as like this site for growth and care and death and kind of the cycling through of, you kind of can put your worries in the dirt too, which is nice. You kind of can leave all your animosities out there if you need a little moment in life. I grew up gardening, surrounded by gardeners, and so I really felt that sense of connection with other people, and you need support to kind of make, dig out a giant root or trellis some wild rose. And with the garden wall, I was really interested in these structures of support and the things that you need to lean on, and that emptiness too. I think the emptiness is really important to me, and how people need to take up space and help build it block by block together. So yeah, I'm hoping with that emptiness in the work, it kind of engages the viewer to participate, to move around it, to see the negative space as windows, to see through and see another person possibly and laugh or feel uncomfortable, whichever. And that possibility of like a permeable boundary too, that you can move around it and you're welcome in that space. And I think of that word spaciousness a lot and how it literally can mean space for yourself, space for other people, but also time and thinking about pausing and growth. So my work is, I'm hoping to engage with the public more too in a way that maybe having more people help with the plastering or help with the stacking of the work in kind of an educational based practice I think would be fun to talk about sustainable materials in garden spaces or domestic spaces or fine art places too.
It makes museums very scared when you say that you want people up against your work. So that's always a tension when you bring it into a kind of museum space, which it's such a limitation sometimes. I think that platform. You want to get closer to the garden wall. I personally do. My favorite sight line in the show is to be able to see Alana's work and Oscar's work through Anna's work, when you kind of catch the negative space. And I know that you and Oscar are very good friends, and I think that there's something there about being able to see Oscar's work through the wall. Especially, you think of a wall, you think impenetrable, you think solid, but there is a porosity in your work. It's quite poetic to me. Brian, I know that you're thinking also about kind of community making, but yours is also grounded in a kind of like a theoretical impulse also. And I know you're indebted to thinking around queer futurity a lot and the ways community operates in that. I was wondering whether you could talk a little bit about it. People always ask me about the shell being titled Gay Bar. And so if you could maybe also touch on that
Totally, yeah. So when I moved here, I had had interest in working with themes of nature or ecology throughout my life, and then kind of shifted into different avenues, and then just found that I kept coming back here, and I also found that I wanted to make work about queerness, and and then once I found that intersection, oh baby, so I began making work in that vein, and at first it was leaning a little more serious, and I was as I was reading through all these reports on the climate and hearing the news about the latest eco disaster, I found myself really slipping into quite a depression, and so after really struggling with that for a bit, I realized that yes, I can't escape thinking about ecology and thinking about our future, but I have to reframe it. And so I began thinking about these optimistic futures that we could potentially inherit, we could potentially be a part of making, and they're certainly in line with sci-fi, and there's a joy, almost a I don't know, just exploring through medium and exploring through figure, and so that's something that I landed on, and it felt really good, and then it felt really great when people saw the work and connected to it. So it's very reinforced that, and so now I feel like I'm building out this world, which is really exciting, and have no plans to stop. But the title Gay Bar, that's so I made this shell, and I've been thinking about the specific shell that I used has spikes on it, and I've been using spikes within my work for a bit as a means of, for example, I superimposed spikes onto a pansy flower, which doesn't have spikes, and as a means of using the term pansy, which can be derogatory, but reclaiming it and adding spikes as a means of protection that's nonviolent, it's just protection. And so the spike has been something that has been important to me. And then I was thinking about shells and how they're literal homes and safe spaces. And this one is particularly exuberant. And just thinking about how a lot of queer people, non-exclusively, but do find safety in like gay bars, for example. And so that's the title.
After party at Blackstone's. Whenever I see that shell, I think about the world that you've created, this underwater future, and I imagine it at like being the central focus in some kind of underwater gay bar that mer people are going to, and there's just beaded shell that they're all dancing under. It's like a disco ball. That's how I think of it. It brings me a lot of pleasure to think of it that way. So yeah, it's so evocative because until you hear you kind of you're thinking through it, it seems like such a odd juxtaposition, a shell and gay bar, but now it seems very kind of natural and evident to me. So I don't want to take up too much space because I know that there must be questions that you have of each other, and now that you're kind of placed in dialogue in the context of the show, maybe things have emerged for you that you'd want to ask of one another. Or maybe not, maybe you're like,
I think something that I've as we're like colleagues and we've had the ability to see each other's practices and see them grow, and I've seen both at Mecca and at Hunoaks how you both work, and I'm blown away by your techniques and blown away by the outcomes, and I'm curious like if there is maybe like historic to your studio practice, but a historic aha moment, or if there's like a newer one that you're really excited about.
Sure. Well, I think the first aha was moving into clay, and also like everything you've been saying about clay and ceramics has just really, I've really like felt connected to. Yeah, I was a printmaker and still am a printmaker, but did a lot of like layer building and building and taking away, and I feel like I was getting tired of just making art prints and feeling like you also just make so many, and then you have like 50 prints in your bedroom, and you're like, what do I do with all these? So then I was like, okay, I'll just do some ceramics. I can try and transfer it into functional objects, which obviously you cannot drink out of the cabbage. It's like totally not functional. But still trying to incorporate that layer building, and I feel like that was kind of an unlocking moment of figuring out how to incorporate the techniques and processes that I loved about printmaking and relief printmaking into ceramics, and finding out that there's a thing called sgraffito, and it's really similar to making a lino cut, and like all these different parallels between the universes, like kind of switching from 2D to 3D. It's really exciting for me. Yeah.
I definitely think an aha moment was starting to work in hemp lime, because I was like, that is for homes, not for art. And just the pure like recycle moment with it. And when I started to build with it, it would crumble, and finding like a particular mix, like mixing clay. Like if you have your recipe list wrong, it could melt into a puddle and have no structure. And so playing with the balance of limestone and water, playing with different pigments, and then seeing it's kind of working with the sensibility of like, oh, it can hold form to an extent. But I think just kind of turning that to that material really felt like an exciting place, and that I'm still working through right now, where I'm trying to mix the material and build more larger scale. I want to make seats where people can literally sit on the material. It isn't, it's structural, but it's not weight bearing. And so I'm trying to figure out how do you kind of maybe wrap a seat form with that material and then can soften it. But I just love its porosity, and it also can just like absorb carbon, so it like gets stronger over time. It's like an air purifier because it's reaching for carbon dioxide in the air. And so I love this idea of like it's kind of changing as you're building with it, and it's never done. So yeah, I'm kind of obsessed with it as a material. And the beauty of this is that it is permanent, but if you really went to town, like you could crumble the material and recycle it and reuse it again. So yeah, I think. How about for you?
Well, I just wanted to say like, thank you both for, those are really great answers. And like, my mind was blown when you equated it to lino cut, and then like the carbon capture is just like, wow.
Supportive community in action. Yeah.
I think for me, I resisted working with themes of nature and themes of ecology for so long, and I was like, how contemporary could that be? Like, you know, just naive. This is when I was much younger, but and then like leaning into that felt really good. And then, but I think my biggest aha was deciding to focus in one setting. And so for a while I was making like a flower and then a cactus and then like waves and some, you know, kind of all over the place, just like really trying to capture it all. And so this world building moment feels really exciting and focused.
I really feel that with your work too. Like I feel you're literally building this underwater world, and I'd love to hear from you both just the way you approach installation of your work too and display, and how the way you have, for example, the screen kind of suspended but coming forward, so you experience like the depth of the shadows, and with your work, this kind of like offering with trophies. Like trophies are kind of this gift that you get to take away. So,
Do you want to go first?
Yeah, we talked about pedestals for so long for the show, and
Vitrine, not vitrine, pedestals, what color, yeah.
Yeah, I guess it's something that I have been thinking about it a lot. I feel like originally I was like, we would love if I could build a board game, put it in the middle of the room, everyone can touch the pieces. Obviously you can't in a museum. I do feel like
Yeah.
there are some rules that need to be followed, but yeah, I feel like in an ideal sense, I want my things to feel interactive and be interactive, and like just kind of always trying to figure out the line between functional and non-functional, especially within the realm of ceramics. But I think that, yeah, I liked what you said. I haven't honestly even thought about it that way, but I love what you said of it being an offering, because I do feel like that's a happy medium in this kind of setting to try and create a space to make your work feel inviting and opening, and like people can feel curious about it still, even though you can't get super close to it or touch it.
I'll still try. That has been my experience. Somebody will always try to touch it. But we have amazing staff who will prevent that from happening. Sorry, Brian.
Yeah, the beaded net. Thanks for asking about it. So that's a relatively new process for me, and also relatively new to my practice. I discovered or rediscovered my love for two-dimensional work. So drawing and painting. That's something that's within the last 2 years. I've been leaning back into that in tandem with my sculptures, and so I'm kind of looking for these places where they meet in the Venn diagram, and so this is a sculptural drawing in many ways. And but as far as the hanging mechanism, and I didn't realize as I was making it how dynamic it becomes depending on the background. So if it's on a darker background, it'll pop. If it's on a lighter one, you can focus on the material nature of it, and it can be fairly a little bit like confusing to look at if there are other things behind it.
Yes.
So, but it's been really exciting, and I'm excited to continue to do these and explore more with them. And yeah, I guess something that has come of it is that I've been thinking about them as pixels in a sense, and to create these drawings or paintings, and so now I'm like having kind of this moment of like, okay, so how else could I apply beads to maybe a sculpture to achieve a similar thing? So that's actually going to the studio tomorrow. We're going to workshop some things. But
How about for you, Anna?
I think that I feel so grateful that it was placed in a way, like displayed, where you can move around it completely and not, it could exist against the wall and that's just fine, but I feel like there's a visual tension, and so that ability to move around the work completely, and also it's kind of cheeky the way that the vessels are placed. So there's this kind of oblong, ovalesque, closed woven vessel that's placed in a way where you enter the space that it seems like that's front on, and then as you move, it kind of elongates more and more. And I felt like that was a beautiful kind of indicator of like, oh, move around, and your perspective will change. So I really appreciated that from your team.
It was my pleasure. It was one of the kind of beauties of when the work gets unpacked and starts to exist together, because I see them in isolation in studios, and your garden wall went up, and Tessa's painting went up, and Rachel's quilt went up, and suddenly there was a line where everything was this beautiful powder blue, and there was like a deep nostalgia embedded in that for me, and it was, it was like, again, speak about an aha moment. That was one for me. And then another one where I'd seen one of Rachel's quilts, and but kind of I wasn't thinking about it in relationship to anything other than Rachel's other quilts. And it went up, and suddenly the purple kind of was picking up a purple in Jenny's work. And then that gave birth to the lilac walls that we now see in the show. So yeah. Those moments are really special. Yeah. I think we have some time for questions from the audience, if there are any that you've been sitting with as we've been talking. Yes, over here. I think we have a microphone that might be coming around. Sure, yeah.
I'm just curious, all of the artists in that exhibit are very young or appear to be. And I just wonder how that feels to be in such a prestigious, to be hung or placed in such a prestigious place as the BMA. If that's a fair question.
All you guys.
I'll be honest, it felt unreal from the moment I heard from Sayantan. My jaw was on the floor that he even wanted to meet with me. And when we met, it felt really incredible conversation and special. And it felt like a celebration of artists that have been impacted by Maine in some way. And it felt like there was space for emerging artists. And the shocker was that I always thought museums were much further in your career as an artist. And so to be at the same table with all these incredible artists that live here locally or have moved away but feel connected, it felt unreal the whole time. And it was incredibly exciting to build work for this space, making work for a place that is so meaningful. I'm sure to all of us, but it really has a piece in my heart. Like I literally feel tethered to Maine, even though I live in Colorado now. Like being here, I'm like, maybe I could just, stay and miss my flight, and I'll start a new life, and I won't go back to my job, and it's gonna be okay. I'll figure it out. So it was a great honor, and I still feel shocked by it.
Yeah, I feel so lucky and grateful and thankful to Sayantan and the museum, but I kind of also thought museums were just farther away, and I think that they realistically kind of are too. But yeah, I mean, this is definitely my first museum appearance, and I mean, I had like my first solo-ish show this summer, and like didn't really start showing things until like a couple years last year anyways. So I feel like it's just exciting to see kind of like a progression happening, and also just like the show in particular, I feel like is amazing being alongside all these other talented artists. And it feels like you're really like, when you go to a museum, you're like, these people are cool and famous, and you're like, actually they're also my peers. And just being in Maine, it's really nice being in community with folks, and feeling like, I don't know, you can kind of you have people to look up to, be alongside them.
For me, it really reaffirmed my decision to move to Maine. My first time that I ever came to Portland was to tour Mecca, and then later it was one of the Free Fridays, I think. And so I came here and I saw Elizabeth Atterbury's work and was blown away, and I was like, wow, the talent here is amazing, and I just adore her work, and her work is located on the opposite side of the room over where Alana's sculptures are, or that's where it was located, and I had this moment of like, I would really like to show here one day, like this is really exciting, so thank you.
Hi, I'm Joanne, and I'm a museum educator here. And the three of us are. And I've been bringing my students down. I lead discussions of 2 or 3 pieces in the museum and then come down there. And I ask them to pick a work that inspires them. And they love the exhibit, and they walk around and they pick something, and then they sort of lead a discussion like, I just did, and it's so great to hear that. So I really want to thank you all for this exhibit. It's wonderful. I love it more every time I go. It's just great. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
That people just want to touch artwork, and I brought my whole 7th grade class a couple weeks ago to this exhibit and looked around, and I was like a hawk moving through the space of being like, yes, it's very, don't touch the beads, don't touch the beads. But then I also have gotten like sharp looks at museums because I got way too close to a Rembrandt, and I like set off an alarm because I like wanted to see the texture of it. So anywho, I'm wondering if any of you have a story like that of, did you get too close to artwork? Were you tempted to touch an artwork in a museum when you shouldn't have?
The calls coming from inside the building, because when I was 7, I very clearly remember at the Museum of Fine Arts in Montreal just going up to a painting and going like this. I don't regret it, actually. I should not have done that. It's fascinating to me working with living artists and getting to be in studios so often where things are just not as precious, and then suddenly they're not even as precious in a gallery setting, because in a gallery they're for sale usually, and so they're still kind of a transferable object. But then in in the museum, they have like an erratic presence, and so you suddenly, we have all these there's stanchions and there's tape, and I have to remind myself that I'm no longer in the artist studio. I'm not at Hugh Noakes going like this on Brian's sculpture, which I was doing 2 weeks prior to its arrival. But really, the museums exist to conserve and preserve works into perpetuity, and so we just have to hold ourselves to the utmost. The highest standards of safety and precaution. But we did realize early on that kids especially really do love the idea of touching Brian's work in particular. So Brian was very kind to give us a whole bag of beads, the same type of beads that are used on the sculpture, so that if kids want to dip their hands in that, they are welcome to. So I think they're available at the front desk if you ask. They're a good teaching tool, right? Yeah, so just don't touch the art, kind of defer. But I think it speaks to how excited people are and how kind of mesmerized they are by your work. Again, these works that exist in space, that textural quality is what invites that touch. And so I think it's so amazing that that's the impulse. We want to stop short of actually getting all that, all those oils on the work itself.
Yeah, I think it's funny too, just the dynamic between once it reaches the museum and in the studio. Just wanted to like talk about that a little bit more. I think especially with ceramics, where nothing is like for sure until you're done with it, because I feel like you build something and you spend 3 days building it and it's like wet and then it just starts cracking and then you try and like fill in the cracks and then they're fine and then you put it in the kiln and it explodes and then like you're just like always preparing yourself to totally just disassociate from what you've created and just be fine if it just disappears. And I think that kind of just having that tension, you're kind of just like, you start slinging things around, throwing them in and out of the kiln, picking up things with like a pinky finger. And then once they reach the museum, they just like have this, yeah, what you're saying, like this persona of like being kind of more presentable. And I think it's also just nice to just like for artists being in a museum or a gallery too, just kind of having your pieces in a way that is like that against a white wall or against a professional wall with nice lighting. It just really changes the atmosphere and kind of allows like a new perspective on your works too.
To this point of like touch, it makes me think of all of the installation team and like handling every single work too. And it's like so beautiful how all like the artist handles the work the most and then so many hands are interacting with it. And it's like such a sense of care in the placement too. And so I really appreciated that from the museum's team. And but I did kind of almost touch something and I didn't. But it was a Ruth Asawa and it was suspended above in San Francisco at the park, and I was so close. And so I know the feeling, but you're just like, I can't do that.
We're just at time, so thank you. I wanted to thank all of the artists for being here with me today, and Anna for flying in from Denver to be here. It's been so lovely having you. Can't wait to continue the conversations. I did want to mention that this is part of a larger series of programming around the show. Every month while the show is up through April, artists are being invited back to be in dialogue with each other or with me. Next month, December 19th, I just wanted to mark that that date has changed. We're now Thursday, December 19th, third Thursdays from 5 to 6. Rachel, Gloria Adams, and I will be talking about quilt making and community upstairs in the galleries. But we have exciting talks and panel discussions all the way through April, and we do hope that you'll come back. And for those who haven't seen the show, we're still open for another hour, so I do hope you'll go back after this discussion and maybe see things afresh and anew. Thank you once again, and good night.
Thank you.